Ja, wer marschiert in Feindesland und singt ein Teufelslied. Ein Schütze steht am Oderstrand und leise summt er mit. Wir pfeifen auf unten und oben und uns kann die ganze Welt verfluchen oder auch loben, grad wie es ihr wohl gefällt.
The development of the parachute forces in National Socialist Germany is a particular one. In 1937, the Air Force and the Army each tried to set up their own parachute units, and as a result there were two parachute badges, one of the Air Force and one of the Army. In 1939, it was decided to merge the existing parachute regiments in the parachute division under the command of the Air Force, the Luftwaffe. A compromise was reached. Paratroopers would be trained and transported by the Luftwaffe, but as soon as it would touch the ground, they would be under the command of the Field Army. This compromise did not end the Army's aspirations for their own airborne units. They formed their so-called air landing units, the 22nd Luftlandedivision. This division would land by airplane after the parachute units secured airfields in enemy territory. In April 1943, the Army decided to form a new company-sized parachute unit as part of the so-called Brandenburg Special Forces. These special forces would operate behind enemy lines in commando operations, often disguised in enemy uniforms. It is not clear whether the Army's initiative to form their own airborne special forces inspired the Waffen-SS, but the participation of SS officer Otto Skorzeny in the airborne operation to liberate Mussolini in September 1943 surely spoke to the imagination, and not long thereafter an independent Waffen-SS parachute unit was formed. From October 1943, the SS Parachute Battalion was being formed in a Luftwaffe parachute training facility. The Waffen-SS graduates even received the Luftwaffe Parachute Badge, but not for long, however.
Und wir bekamen das Fallschirmschützenabzeichen der Luftwaffe verliehen und 4 Wochen später mussten wir es wieder abgeben, weil unser dicker Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring nicht anders zu tun hatte, als zu protestieren. Das gibt es doch nicht, dass Waffen-SS-Leute mit dem Fallschirmschützenabzeichen der Luftwaffe herumlaufen. Und was wir alle nicht wussten, es gab bereits ein Fallschirmschützenabzeichen des Heeres. Und dann bekamen wir, also wir mussten dann unsere Auszeichnungsurkunde zurückgeben, das Fallschirmschützenabzeichen der Luftwaffe zurückgeben, bekamen das sogenannte Heeresspringerabzeichen.
This testimony should be taken with a grain of salt, because there are pictures of SS paratroopers with the Luftwaffe badge. The men selected for the SS Parachute Battalion were chosen men, but rather in negative sense. At least 50% of the men were Waffen-SS military convicts. They were stripped of their SS runes on their collar, and in order to win them back they had to prove themselves worthy in battle. This gave the SS Parachute Battalion a stigma of a panel unit.
Dann kamen wir nach Benešov bei Prag auf den Truppenübungsplatz zu dem angehenden SS-Fallschirmjägerbattalion. Und wie wir da ankamen, stellten wir fest, da laufen ja komische Waffen-SS-Angehörige rum. Die haben keine Siegrunen hier, die haben keine Dienstgrade hier am Spiegel, nur da schwarz und da schwarz. Was sind das für Leute? Ja. Wir warteten, wir traten dann zum Appell an. Und der Kommandeur, der fragte uns alle, wer von euch ist vorbestraft? Ging keine Hand hoch. So, das gibt's doch nicht. Keiner ist vorbestraft. Und dann kamen wir dahinter, die Kameraden, die nur schwarze Spiegel hatten und sonst nichts, Das waren alles Vorbestrafte, aber Vorbestrafte, die ihre Strafen während der Dienstzeit begangen haben. Das heißt jetzt nicht ehrenrührig, also Diebstahl oder Vergewaltigung oder sowas, nein, sondern in der Hauptsache Disziplinarverfahren. Das heißt, 2 Tage über den Urlaubsschein erst zur Einheit zurück oder nachts ohne Genehmigung außerhalb der Kaserne übernachtet oder Alimente nicht bezahlt für ein uneheliches Kind, solche Geschichten. Und da stellten wir fest, das sind Vorbestrafte, die nannte man Bewährungsschützen. Und dann teilte man uns mit, das aufzustellen des SS-Fallschirmjägerbattalion ist eine Bewährungseinheit. Auf der einen Seite guckten wir natürlich blöd als junge Leute, weil wir sagten, Bewährungseinheit, das riecht so nach Minenlatschen, ja, so oder Vorratskommando 5-Mann Spähtrupp, die nicht wiederkommen. Also wir waren nicht ganz so glücklich.
The first operation of the battalion was in former Yugoslavia, in the province of Bosnia-Herzegovina. It was the so-called Raid on Drvar in May 1944 in the context of Unternehmen Röschersprung, or in English, Knight's Move. The country had a strong communist guerrilla under the command of the charismatic Josip Broz, better known as Tito. The Germans believed that by taking him and his headquarters out, armed resistance would collapse. The paratroopers would be delivered by parachute and gliders and capture their target in a defended mountain stronghold, just like the raid on Gran Sasso to liberate Mussolini in September 1943. Just like in that raid, the paratroopers were to be delivered in 2 waves. While the Luftwaffe paratroopers were credited with the liberation of Mussolini, the capture of Tito had to be the masterstroke of the newly created Waffen-SS Parachute Battalion. What was meant to be a masterstroke turned out in a disaster. The German Air Force bombarded the town and its surroundings in the early morning of May 25th. This was meant to suppress resistance, but what it actually achieved was to wake everybody up. It took away the element of surprise and put the Yugoslav partisans on high alert. The German glider crew, which landed in front of Tito's cave at 7 a.m., was totally massacred by Tito's guard unit, for example. Due to delaying actions of local resistance, it was not until 3 hours after the landings that the Waffen-SS paratroopers managed to stage an assault against Tito's hideout. A total of 2 attacks were staged, which both failed. By then, Tito had escaped in the mountains, and the Waffen-SS paratroopers were in dire straits due to ammunition shortages, while waves of partisans closed in on their positions. When the SS paratroopers were relieved the next day, they had suffered horrible casualties. Half of them were killed or wounded. The captured code of Tito was a sore consolation prize. The unit had to be rebuilt. While rebuilding, the unit was slated for an operation to capture the strategic Finnish Åland Islands in the case of a Finnish defection from the German war effort. In July 1944, every combat unit was directed to the Eastern Front to plug the huge gap after the destruction of Army Group Center by the Soviet summer offensive. 2 companies of the SS Parachute Battalion were attached to the 6th Panzer Division to relieve the besieged German garrison in Vilnius. Interestingly enough, they were joined by 2 companies of the 16th Parachute Regiment of the Luftwaffe. At this stage of the war, the paratroopers ceased to be deployed airborne and were flown into battle as regular infantry. In August 1944, after 1 month of action in the Baltic states, the strength of the companies was down from 260 to just 70 men. The men had to stay in line until October of that year, however. The remnants of the 500th SS Parachute Battalion were then merged with the 600th SS Parachute Battalion. In essence, it was just a renumbering of the same unit. There was never more than 1 SS Parachute Battalion at any given time. The next assignment was Unternehmen Panzerfaust, or in English, Operation Tank Fist, named after the famous handheld German anti-tank weapon. This operation was executed to prevent the defection of the Hungarians to the Soviets. If the Hungarians would lay down their arms, there would be huge gaps in the Eastern Front, and the last remaining oil fields at the disposal of the German war effort would be lost. The SS Parachute Battalion was deployed to prevent this disaster from happening.
Und zwar bestand die Gefahr, dass die ungarische Regierung einen Separatfrieden mit der Sowjetunion macht. Und das sollte verhindert werden. Und aus diesem Grund sind wir nach Budapest geflogen. Wir standen schon in der Tür von der EU zum Absprung bereit, als von vorne von der Kanzel das Licht für den Absprung abgeschaltet wurde und ein Unteroffizier rauskam und sagte, bitte nicht springen, wir landen. Die Affäre ist politisch beigelegt. Also landeten wir in Budapest.
After their safe landing at the airfield, the paratroopers went on to occupy Hungarian government buildings and eventually the storming of the Budapest Castle Hill, the seat of the Hungarian government. This operation went like clockwork, and it was just the kind of operation the battalion was created for. It proved its worth as an airborne quick reaction force. This operation cemented the relationship between the SS paratroopers and the organizer of this operation, Otto Skorzeny. Skorzeny had begun organizing his own special forces under the umbrella of the so-called 502nd SS-Jägerbattalion. In military terms, Jäger means light infantry in German. This unit was basically a follow-up of the aforementioned Brandenburg units, and it contained personnel with special qualities, like language skill and handling of explosives. Skorzeny cannibalized the Brandenburg units for this purpose, which fell from grace after their patron, Admiral Canaris, was dismissed in February 1944. The SS Parachute Battalion, on the contrary, was a pure combat unit and should not be confused with the aforementioned Jägerbattalion. Nevertheless, the SS Parachute Battalion was required to deliver 2 companies for Skorzeny's next operation, Unternehmen Greif, or in English, Operation Griffin. Operation Griffin turned out to be a waste of resources, but by the end of 1944 there were few opportunities left for the SS Parachute Battalion, as airborne operations were virtually suspended due to complete Allied air superiority, and parachute units were thrown into the line as regular infantry. When the Russians broke through the German lines and reached the Oder, it was once more the turn of the SS paratroopers to plug the gaps. In January 1945, the battalion was being deployed to defend the last bridgeheads over the Oder at Grabo and Fürstenberg.
In Grabo allein haben wir in einer Nacht 31 T-34 abgeschossen. Dadurch kann man sehen, was der Russe für ein Interesse hatte, diesen letzten Brückenkopf ostwärts der Oder oder vorletzten Brückenkopf ostwärts der Oder zu erobern. Das hat immerhin bis zum 1. März gedauert, bis es den Russen gelungen ist, zurückzuziehen. Das heißt, er hat den Brückenkopf nicht erobert, aber man hat eingesehen, der ist nicht mehr zu halten. Wir mussten eines Nachts, wir haben also sämtliche Häuser da von Grabo wurden noch mit Minen verlegt und mit Sprengstoff. Das heißt, wir haben Klaviere wurden mit Sprengkapseln versehen. Wenn einer von den lieben Russen Klavier spielen wollte, dann flog das ganze Klavier mit in die Luft. Und wir hatten also sehr einfallsreiche Pioniere, die an den alten T-34, die abgeschossen waren, wurden auch die Deckel, wo irgendwas zu bewegen war, mit Sprengstoff versehen. So wenn die da neugierig reinguckten, dann flog der Panzer nochmals in die Luft. Also der Pionierzugführer der Pioniere wurde hinterher also blendend gelobt, weil unser Kommandeur sagte, die Russen waren allein beschäftigt, 4 Wochen lang alle Sprengstoffzellen zuzusuchen, bevor sie an weiter marschieren dachten. Und wir zogen uns dann elegant aus dem Brückenkopf zurück.
In March 1945, the Parachute Battalion was for the third time in 1 year a mere shadow of its former self, and not capable of any meaningful action. Still, plans were being drafted in which the SS paratroopers would be dropped behind enemy lines. By this stage of the war, this meant certain death. The remnants withdrew to the Bavarian Alps, where they hid out until the unconditional surrender of the German armed forces in May 1945. We can conclude that despite the high expectations of the SS Parachute Battalion as an elite force, the battalion was mainly used as line infantry due to the dire strategic situation of Germany at this stage of the war. The only truly airborne operations were the operations to capture Tito in May 1944 and the operation to capture the Hungarian government in October 1944. In the first operation, the inexperienced battalion was badly mauled. But the second operation can be called a resounding success. The unit proved itself a reliable combat unit in the Baltics and on the Oder. The battalion was definitely a combat elite, but an elite which was wasted in the meat grinder of the Eastern Front. It was rarely deployed for the purpose it was raised, namely as a quick reaction force. Last but not least, I will discuss some findings during my research. First of all, there is this parachute helmet with the SS runes on the side, which I have never found on any World War II photograph, so I regard it as a fake. The second is the cuff band, which is prone for discussion because there have been some photographs with SS parachuters wearing cuff bands, but again, it has never been officially issued. Last but not least, there's this very fake commemorative pin based on the belt buckle of the Waffen-SS, the Waffen-SS Death's Head, and the Luftwaffe Eagle. This is something which may be appealing to some, but it is not historically correct.